Hello, everyone, and welcome to Peaks TV. I'm David Chen,
I'm Joanna Robinson.
and welcome to the podcast. Peaks TV is a recap podcast about Twin Peaks: The Return, currently airing on Showtime right now. On this episode of Peaks TV, we're going to be recapping Season 3, Episodes 5 and 6. So we'll be spoiling everything through those episodes. If you want to find more episodes of this podcast, go to peakstv.com. You can also email us at peakstv@gmail.com. Before we dive into the show, got a bunch of stuff to talk about. Firstly, Joanna, it's been a while, huh? Been
Yeah.
a few weeks. I mean, I think because Showtime, I think it's been a while since like the last two episodes that we recapped have aired. They took a break for Memorial Day, so it actually took several weeks since the last episode of this podcast. And a lot of people have been asking, where are the new episodes? I did want to clarify the schedule for this show is that we are going to be recapping every 2 episodes. We don't usually recap every 2 episodes when we do a podcast. We usually recap every episode, but given time constraints, given the level of interest that there was in this show, given the level of interest in the Kickstarter we have for the show, that's kind of what we're doing. So basically, every even number episode that airs, we're going to be releasing a recap podcast the week following that. So that's why this week we're recapping season 3. Episodes 5 and 6. And then the next episode of Peaks TV will be episodes 7 and 8, and so on all the way through episode 18. So just wanted to clarify that. I think this podcast, by the way, has grown dramatically in terms of listenership since we recorded the first episode. So if you're new to listening to this, welcome. I do have a request. If you enjoy this podcast with Joanna Robinson and I, then please go to iTunes or wherever you enjoy the show and leave a review or give us a star rating. It really does help, and we would greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So it helps people find us in the sea of Twin Peaks related podcasts, of which there are, I'm going to go out there and say 50, there's just a lot of them.
Conservatively, yeah.
Yeah. So if you could go and leave us a review, we'd greatly appreciate it. Please do that, and you'll help us get discovered. Anyway, so this week, before we get to this week, we got a few follow-up points from last week's episode, or I should say, we have a few follow-up points from the last episode of this podcast. And one of them is we had talked about Agent Tammy Preston, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a very attractive FBI agent that was gawked at in season 3, episode 4 of the show, and led us to question what exactly David Lynch's view is on women, how he treats women in his shows. And I actually have more to say about that later on in the episode, Joanna Robinson, at the end of this podcast. I want to ask a question about that. But in the meantime, we did get a bunch of emails and a bunch of tweets. I'm going to read one of them from Erica from Boston, my old stomping grounds. Erica writes into peakstv@gmail.com. The problem for me with Agent Tamara Preston is not that she's too pretty, it's that she looks wafy, like she'd blow away in a fight. Add to that she's highly made up with this super tight skirt and heels, which would not be convenient for the work that she's doing. My first thought was they hired a model and not an actress for the role. It also made me feel weird about the long walk away. If she's there for eye candy, fine. But if we're supposed to take her seriously as old enough and respected enough for a promotion, they need to focus on those aspects of her character, not on her body. That email comes from Erica from Boston. Joanna, reaction to that? It sounds like you got one.
I guess, I mean, I appreciate some of the things that Erica is saying. I don't really love talking about other women's bodies, like in either direction of the spectrum. But yeah, we got actually several emails, and I think one of them was actually from someone who works in law enforcement, a woman who works in law enforcement, who sort of mentioned more than anything else, it was the hairstyle that struck her as like not code almost. Not that there's necessarily a code in the FBI, but just sort of like that there just tends to be a more conservative or business-like hairstyles in the FBI. Anyway,
right, or even like many working environments do not allow hair past like the nape of the neck, for instance.
Right.
You need to tie it up or whatever because it can be a hazard. So it can get caught on things. Someone could grab it. You know what I mean? Like there's there's legitimate reasons why people think it did not strike them as an
There
authentic depiction.
are OSHA reasons. No,
Yeah, yeah.
but um, yeah, and I actually got to interview the woman who plays Agent Tammy Preston. She is like a longtime collaborator with David Lynch. She's actually a singer. This is her first major acting role. She's a singer. She's done a lot of music with David Lynch. She is a very, very charming and thoughtful and lovely human. So I just want to say that right off the bat. Like I had kind of a negative reaction to this depiction when I first saw it. So I went into that interview with her sort of expecting to not be very taken by her, and I was entirely taken by her. I found her very thoughtful, very interesting. So that whole interview is over on vanityfair.com. I did ask her about the clothing choices, if she like sort of got to pick Agent Preston's clothing, and she said that was all David Lynch, and that he really wanted a very retro style, silks and a high cut skirt and all this sort of stuff. So this is entirely David Lynch's vision for her. And then I asked her about the scene that we discussed at the end of episode 4, which is the walk away. And she sort of laughed. She's like, yeah, like it didn't even occur to me that this would be a problem for anyone else. Cause she has a very sort of new age, like, I'm okay, you're okay. Like, I think any appreciation of the human body is good. I appreciate women's bodies. I think it's fine to appreciate women's bodies. Yeah. And so she just said that she was excited to have a walk away. She didn't feel demeaned. She didn't really see it as objectification, though she can understand why people would see it that way. And she just thought it was about like love and appreciation for the female form, and how like the way it's composed, where it's like drab gray concrete everywhere, and then this like, living, breathing woman was sort of making a statement. Anyway, whether or not you agree, that was her take on the scene, and which I thought was interesting. And once again, you can go find that whole interview over on vanityfair.com. The headline is Twin Peaks star Krista Bell, that's her full first and only name, on being David Lynch's muse. So.
All right, yeah, we'll link to it in the show notes as well. The other follow-up, Jenna, it's been so long since we've recorded, just because we recorded both those recaps in one sitting. So, like, even before they aired on Showtime, we had already recorded. And so there is one other piece of follow-up. I think on one of the last episodes, you had said that the person who played Man from the Other Place, Michael J. Anderson, had passed away. In fact, we got a bunch
I thought maybe.
Gotcha.
And I was very wrong.
So, in fact, the Michael J. Anderson, who played the Man from the Other Place, he is still alive, and he is not in the new Twin Peaks for really bizarre and unsettling reasons. Specifically, I think there's many reasons why he's not in the new season. We'll never know the truth. There are a lot of rumors thrown around, but I think it comes down to he accused David Lynch of being a pedophile, right? If I'm not mistaken. And that is an upsetting accusation that was, seemingly unfounded, and seems to have soured the relationship between Michael J. Anderson and David Lynch. And so very upsetting, but just wanted to clarify that that's what happened, and that's probably why he has been replaced by this tree thing with ellipse on top. What'd you say?
I just laughed because, yeah.
Is that right? Am I right about that? Right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Pedophilia, and I think
he accused
murder
David Lynch of molesting his daughter. Right?
Yeah, that like Twin Peaks was him like working out his issues about his like teenage daughter, who is now a director in her own right, Jennifer Lynch, who directed some episodes of American Horror Story last season. But yeah, accused him of sexually assaulting his own daughter, and I think also of murder. So, it's yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Well, anyway, let's dive into these last two episodes, Jenna Robinson.
Wait, can I know we're broadcasting live, sorry everyone who's listening, but I can't find, there was that other email about liberals giving David Lynch a pass on some of his, like, do you want to dive into that, or do you want to
sure.
maybe save that for, I don't have it in my email. I don't know if you have it. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Is this the one, I think Tammy was miscast. I'm not going to let myself get outraged. Maybe Lynch has some dirty old man tendencies. It's not a big deal. No, not that one?
No. I think it was something about, like, in the subject line, it was like, why David Lynch gets a pass or why we give David Lynch a pass or something like that.
Oh, are we social justice warriors giving
Yeah.
David Lynch a pass? Okay. Um, all right, let's just get into one last email before we get to this week's episodes. And please let us know where you're writing in from when you email us at peakstv@gmail.com. This comes in from, I don't know, but someone emailed peakstv@gmail.com and said, I like David Lynch. You guys like David Lynch. That's really totally cool. He makes good material. However, I think it's a little crazy to ignore the very clear racism, sexism, ableism, and transphobia in his films and TV output. As far as I can tell, in all of David's oeuvre, the only two black characters given speaking parts by Lynch himself are the prostitute in Twin Peaks: The Return and Richard Pryor in Lost Highway for a split second. Clarence Williams III and the Grand Northern Hotel employee appeared on the show during Lynch's absence from the series. Hawk, the police deputy, is referred to routinely by way of a lot of stereotypes and cliches about Native Americans, even this season. One character dressed up in yellowface in order to disguise herself during Twin Peaks. Josie Packard is routinely dressed in a kind of geisha style, even though she's Chinese, and is routinely exoticized. Objectification of women is fairly constant in the original series, the film, and the new series, with the hilarious camera swoop up and down Agent Preston's body, whilst two men stare at her ass and comment favorably. Gordon's hearing and Nadine's mental illness are totally intended to be jokes that we're meant to laugh at. Virtually every line out of David Duchovny's mouth is in fact some reference to his being trans, if that's what he is, or a double entendre that draws attention to that fact. Like I said, I really enjoy Twin Peaks and enjoy some of Lynch's other material. I just see no reason why we have to gloss over the fact that he's from another time, and he fetishizes that time in a way that is in keeping with the values of the era, i.e. everyone but straight white men are kind of weird / funny / sexy / irrelevant. So that is an email subject line. Are we SJW types giving David Lynch a pass?
Yeah.
Written to peakstv@gmail.com. What do you think, Joanna?
So, I mean, I don't agree with every single point necessarily because we brought up some of this. I think we brought up the like hearing impairment jokes. I think we talked about that. We talked about the trans thing. We talked about the yellow face thing.
Yeah.
And we've sort of fallen on different sides of those various things. But I really like the last line about David Lynch fetishizing a certain time period because I think that's true. And I think you could see that even in like the way that he dresses. Like when the actress Christabel was talking to me about how David Lynch dressed her, that to me did read as slightly fetishistic. He's like he wants, he had a say down to the fabrics of what she wore on, like, and it is a retro throwback, and so like he fetishizes this time period, this like sort of 1950s time period. That's just true, but he also tries to expose the hypocrisy of it at the same time. Does he always do that with like every single eye open to our modern sensibilities? I'm not sure. I don't think he does. But I don't think it's just, does it make sense that I don't think it's just about him fetishizing sort of like the era of the white 50s? It's about him like fetishizing and condemning at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, let me just say I don't agree with a lot of these characterizations within this email. Like I think this is taking it a little bit too far. For instance, Josie Packard is routinely dressed in a kind of geisha style, even though she's Chinese and is routinely exoticized. I just don't know if I agree with that assessment. Ditto the assessment about David Duchovny's like every line is some reference to his being trans or her being trans. Like that's not my experience of the show. Like
Right.
it just doesn't match up with my empirical experience of the show. So like on a fundamental level, I don't know if I agree with the email. I think if there's anything I think David Lynch fetishizes, it's this kind of the other, right? The things that aren't straight white men, and that I think that there's a lot of complications with how he fetishizes those groups of people, and sometimes it's very admiringly, like they're depicted very admiringly and as like very positive, and sometimes they're depicted as laughable. And I think it's you got to just take it on a case by case basis. So I think this whole idea that he's just a terrible, like totally non-progressive and very regressive in his politics and culture is I don't agree with it. I think there are certain aspects, like what we've talked about with Tammy Preston, that we need to evaluate and
I think
yeah.
I think the other thing that I'm really responding to in that email is the mention of casting specifically of like African American actors because you have like because someone had already independently brought up to me sort of the incredible whiteness of the revival cast, and you've got Ernie Hudson in episode 5, which we're going to talk about very briefly. You've got the actress who plays Jade, a prostitute. But you don't have much else as far as like at least African American representation so far in the series, I think. And I'm not saying like it needs to be a numbers game, but it just sort of, belies, I think, maybe a lack of interest in that perspective. That's not the end of the world. I think we've talked about this on Gen Pop episodes. I don't think it's the end of the world if your perspective as a white man is of a white man. But I think it is important to if we hold David Lynch up as one of the like master auteurs of our time, which we do, I think it's important for us to continue to demand that there be space for people whose point of view is less white, less straight. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. My fiance is a much bigger fan of David Lynch than I am, and so she's watched a lot more of his work than I have. And something that she said to me was that after watching all of his work, she is convinced that David Lynch has pretty much nothing to say about race. And I don't know that that might be an exaggeration, but it doesn't strike me as a big exaggeration based on what I've seen. I mean, maybe it's just not something that he's interested in exploring. And you can evaluate it in that sense, but it feels, when I say those words out of my mouth, it feels right to me. Like I don't think there's not a lot of things I can point to that show that he's that interested in it. So anyway, people can make their own judgments, and we'll see how, maybe Ernie Hudson is a major character for the rest of the season. Who knows? We have no idea.
Who knows?
I think that's unlikely, though.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
Thanks for the emails. Keep them coming into peakstv@gmail.com. One last thing before we dive into this week's episodes. That is to say, season 3, episodes 5 and 6. I saw a bunch of people tweet out after the last episode aired that one of my favorite writers, Seth Abramovich, said, Twin Peaks recappers just give up. And I was wondering what you make of that sentiment, this idea that the show is so impenetrable that doing a conventional recap job on it is basically hopeless.
I think conventional recap job is not the way to go on this show. Yeah. I'm actually never a fan of conventional recaps, except for when I need a reminder about what happened in an episode, and then I praise God to all the conventional recappers. Right. But as far as how I like to cover TV, I don't usually do a conventional recap. I don't see the point of just regurgitating plot, and I like a prayer for all the Twin Peaks recappers out there, because even just writing the bullet point show notes for us, which I do for Game of Thrones, which I did for Westworld, I'm quite used to doing it, is hard because there are so many characters and it's just so many threads going. So yeah, if anyone out there who is a recapper has the luxury to just say no, just say no. But for those of you who I know sweat over those recaps for the money that you desperately earn, I bless you and Godspeed this season. So yeah.
Episode 5 of season 3 begins with Lorraine, played by Tammy Baird, talking to someone named Jean, who is staking out the housing development where Dougie's car is. She's majorly agitated. She says, "God damn it, Jean, this job was supposed to be done yesterday. Are you trying to get me killed?" Lorraine reluctantly calls a weird device, a weird device in a bowl somewhere rings, right?
Yeah.
Classic Lynch. Classic Lynch. I mean, and then we follow up on that device later on in this episode.
You didn't want to read my spoiler alert.
You said spoiler alert
for episode 6.
Lorraine reluctantly calls a weird device in a bowl elsewhere.
No, but she says in episode 5, "Are you trying to get me killed?" She's dead by the end of episode 6. So that's my little spoil. We can spoil through episode 6 in this episode.
We can.
Right?
Yes, we
All
can.
right.
So yeah, how do you have anything to say about, I'm not sure how best. Usually we read these plot points and then I pause and ask you what is going on. Maybe I should just charge through these and then we stop if there's something interesting to say about them.
That sounds good.
But I mean, do you have I guess, what do you think do you have any theories on this weird device or this bowl or anything like that?
I mean,
I think the one thing is that the bowl is in Buenos Aires. Is that right? Like the
yeah,
implication is that the bowl
yeah.
is in Buenos Aires, and that's where the FBI agent played by David Bowie was last seen, if I'm not mistaken, right?
True, true. Yeah. There's this whole string, the whole Vegas string of like, because if it seems like there are two factions after Dougie, that there's the people who want the money from Dougie,
Yep.
and then there's these people who want Dougie dead. And I really think those are two different factions.
Hmm.
And the people who want Dougie dead, I think, are related to Evil Cooper, like that Evil Cooper wants Dougie dead, or whoever came through as Dougie. Like he wants to tie up loose ends. He wants no chance for the real Cooper to come through and out that, so it was like, I think we talked about this in the previous episode, but like it seemed almost like an like an impossible escape that Dougie happened to drop his key and lean down just as he was driving past the goons that were staking out the housing development where Dougie was. And so he got out of there, and then they were just watching his car for the next like few days or whatever.
Impossible, or was the Black
Luck.
Lodge looking out for
Yeah,
him, right?
exactly.
Or the White Lodge, as it were. Like
The fairies,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, so they blow up his car, like all this sort of stuff, and like the fact that they can't confirm that Dougie's dead, and like Lorraine ultimately has to pay a price for that. Um, right, that seems like different from the people who just want money from Dougie, who we will get to in episode 6.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, it feels to me like it could all just be one group that wants to simultaneously kill him and also extract money from him.
But
Um,
I think the character played by Patrick Fischler, whose name I don't have in front of me right now, but he's the guy in Vegas, who we keep seeing, and he's the one who, like, I guess I'm just skipping ahead to the next episode. Duncan Todd is the character's name, but he to me seems connected to Mr. C, and I don't know. Anyway,
Mr. C,
Evil Cooper.
Evil Cooper, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in the next scene, Jane Addams finds the cause of death on the headless John Doe. Remember that was a whole plotline. She said the guy hadn't eaten in days, at least not food. Found a ring in his stomach, and the ring says to Dougie with love from Janie E.
Yeah.
So, this is. I think we are to interpret that this is like Dougie's dead body. Is that right?
No, I think they're still looking at Major Garland Briggs' body, because that comes up in the Ernie Hudson scene at the end of the episode.
That's right. That's where the fingerprints, the
Yeah.
fingerprints on the dead body with the Dougie ring, are in Major Briggs' body. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, so the ring is inside Major Garland Briggs' body, and the only reason I can think that that would be is like we know that Dougie was then wearing the Owl Lodge ring, that jade ring. And so, like, if somehow his wedding ring got replaced with this Owl Lodge ring, which is, I don't know. But that's as close as I have, is that his ring somehow got inside Major Garland Briggs' body because of some sort of ritual that they did. I don't know that Major Garland Briggs would be involved with that, but some sort of Black Lodge-esque ritual that they did in order to create this like other doppelganger of Cooper.
In the next scene, Evil Cooper's in jail, and then he says, "And now food is coming," seemingly with an unnatural level of prescience.
Yes.
Then he looks in the mirror, and it kind of flashes back to Bob. Like his face does this distorting thing where you see Bob like in him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "You're still with me. That's good." So we assume that Bob is still part of Evil Cooper in some way, even though Evil Cooper seems to have kind of still behaving a little bit weirdly, right? Which is something we described the last time we podcasted.
Yeah, but being a little bit more together than he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we meet this guy named Steven. I think it's the first time we see him, right?
Yeah.
He goes into interview, and the guy at the place where he's interviewing says, "You're like," basically gives him the Billy Madison speech. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul, for his terrible resume. Which, like, really, like, how bad could that have been? I actually felt bad for Steven in that scene.
Yeah, I felt bad for Steven in that scene, but then not later.
If that's really, if you're really trying to mentor this kid, that's not the way to do it. That's all I have to say about that. We have a scene with the Deputy Truman, who is not the original Truman. It's the original Truman's brother, right?
Yeah.
And then his wife comes in, Doris, and she is really upset about a wide variety of household items, right?
Yes.
What
And
did what did you make of this? Like, and we see Doris in the next episode, episode 6 as well. What did you make of that whole thing?
oh, I was so put off by it and like put off by it again later. And then in the next episode, we get like a revelation about it. And then you feel bad about being put off by it. But I
Yeah.
think my more like salient takeaway from that scene is that, from what he says to his brother, which is like, that's rough when you get those tests back, sounds like the way they're explaining the absence of that character of the original Sheriff Truman is that he's sick somehow, like very sick.
And they may kill him off screen.
Right, something like that.
Michael
So,
Ontkeen.
yeah.
But yeah, so let's just talk about that plot line. Like later on, you see the wife again, and then it's revealed that their son committed suicide, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Because of PTSD, presumably. And that she wasn't always like, their marriage wasn't always like this, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's like there's a war veterans and PTSD war commentary big time in episode 6, which is kind of surprising, I thought. So
but you were put off by it because it's kind of this old trope of this awful shrew woman and the really put upon husband, right?
I mean, sure, but also I just did not want to hear her talk anymore.
I see.
I was both put off by it and like completely in it to the point where I was like, please, someone shut Doris up. I can't hear her screeching anymore.
So then you find out why she's screeching or why.
I know,
what
and then I'm like, oh, I'm the villain. I see.
So then what happens? Janie E. Talks to Dougie, right? Walks him outside. She says she's hidden the money, and tells him to pay the $50,000 that he owes.
And I was grateful that she says, Dougie, you're acting weird as shit. And I was grateful that she finally said something because she's been like slightly weirded out by his behavior, but not weirded out enough, like too accepting and docile, as everyone around him has been. But like,
yeah, I wonder, like, it might make sense to just talk about the Dougie storyline separately at the end, because I feel like it is the most coherent and accessible out of all the plot lines, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to skip all the Dougie things in episode 5
should we?
for now. Yep.
Is that just how we should do it? Should we just run through like the character wise?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to do it. So let's talk about the Dougie stuff later. All right, because there's a lot of Dougie stuff. Let's just talk about the non-Dougie stuff for now. I mean, tangentially related to the Dougie stuff is that. Well, firstly, one thing I just want to mention about that scene before we go off the Dougie stuff, there's this interesting scene where Dougie's looking into his son's face and then is moved by it.
Yeah.
What did you think? What did you think of that? That's like a very Lynchian thing to have happen. And whenever something like that happens, I always think to myself, what am I supposed to take away from this? And did you have any thoughts on that? Like, is it just like, Dougie is moved at the childlike innocence of his son? Like, I just didn't know what we're supposed to think.
I don't know necessarily what we're supposed to make of it, but I really like Dougie's emotional connection to his son.
Right.
And it feels I don't know. It feels like, I think a lot of something that the great Welsh actor Michael Sheen wrote on Twitter yesterday was, what if Twin Peaks The Return is called, and I'm serious, this is by the actor Michael Sheen. He wrote, what if Twin Peaks The Return is called Twin Peaks The Return because it's all about Cooper. The whole thing is about Cooper returning to himself. And that's what The Return is. And so we might get like 18 full fucking episodes of Dougie, basically. But so anything that we see that feels like Coop waking up to some degree. So this feels like an emotional waking up, right?
Right.
He feels like sentimental about this kid character. And you feel kind of bad about it too, because eventually when like everything shakes out, he's not necessarily going to get to stay with this kid. This is not his kid, Yeah. So any emotional attachment he's forming can't be permanent. Did
you ever see that movie Source Code?
With Jake Gyllenhaal?
Jake Gyllenhaal, yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna spoil source code. So if you don't want to know what happens in source code, like tune out for a second. But I remember watching like firstly, that's a solid sci-fi thriller in my opinion. You should check it out. But at the end of source code, you basically find out that like throughout the whole movie, he's been like Jake Gyllenhaal's character has been quantum leaping into this guy named Sean Fentress and trying to prevent this terrorist attack. And at the end of the movie, you find out that he prevented the terrorist attack, and he continues to live as Sean Fentress. And I remember I interviewed Duncan Jones. I did a Q&A with Duncan Jones, the director of that movie, and he's like, think of like what happens the moment after the movie ends. Like does he go back to Sean Fentress's house, and like does he like feed Sean Fentress's dog and like live his life and go teach at Sean Fentress's school? This idea of replacing someone is actually really disturbing and upsetting. And anyway, I just got a source code vibe from this whole Dougie plotline, and just wanted to call that out.
I like this is the most relevant source code has been since it premiered. So,
wow, tons of source code shade that I don't appreciate, Joanna. All right. So let's talk about what happens to the rest of this episode, not related to Dougie. At the Silver Mustang Casino, Brett Gelman is being accused of being in on this whole jackpot situation and gets the crap kicked out of him. He's fired. Jim Belushi tells him, leave this town, don't ever come back. And tells his replacement, let us know if that guy ever comes in here again. There's 3 women dressed in pink just watching on the side.
With bunny ears?
Yeah. Which, again, is a striking image. But I ask myself if there's anything. It feels very like people who have been inspired by Lynch, like Nicholas Winding Refn, for instance. Like, there's a very similar scene in Drive. Have you seen that movie, Drive?
I have.
Where Ryan Gosling is beating the crap out of someone, and there's all these naked women around, like watching him. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It feels like I'm not sure what he's trying to say with that scene other than create this really striking visual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it is very, like, those 3 women lined up. You talk about the sort of Dougie looking at his kid feeling very Lynchian. That feels very Lynchian to me, is like these 3 women in bubblegum pink.
Who are like not, like there's no reason they have to be there in the scene.
Right.
Like there's just no explanation for their presence.
Right.
Other than to look very striking as they observe this scene nonchalantly.
And what I do love most about that scene, of course, is like an unexpected and delightful deployment of Jim Belushi. It's like, I feel like what he does with Jim Belushi here is like what Tarantino does with actors sometimes. You know what I mean? Or just sort of like a weird reclamation of an actor that you never expected to see do something that sort of made you sit up and take notice that way.
Yeah.
It's just Jim Belushi.
I know I'm dropping the references like left and right this episode, but like another thing that reminds me of what you just said is like Liv Tyler in The Leftovers.
Sure.
I feel like that's an actor who I hadn't really considered as being like particularly serious over the last few years. Like,
right.
It's just not a part of my life because I haven't watched much of her work.
Yeah.
And then that show brought to life this whole other side of her that I'd never witnessed before. And this, who knows how much Jim Belushi is going to be in this season, but for that one scene, he definitely made an impression. So then Jade gets her car washed, and they find the Great Northern Hotel room key, which, very evocative key, and not the last thing in these 2 episodes that was going to be evocative of the original series. So she mails back the key, and we'll see what the consequences of that are. At the diner, Peggy Lipton is doing the books. Shelley's working behind the counter. And Amanda Seyfried shows up as Shelley's daughter, Becky, delivering bread. And she says, I need more money. Shelley gives it to her. And she doesn't feel super great about it. And then Amanda Seyfried gets in the car with Steven, right, the guy who got dressed down for his resume, and they have this nice scene. It feels to me like they
have this nice scene.
Yeah, I mean, nice scene, and by nice I mean incredibly disturbing. I mean, it feels like a retread of kind of the Leo / Bobby Briggs / Shelley relationship from the original Twin Peaks, right?
that, I mean, that's sort of what they were going for when like Peggy Lipton's character says to Shelley, sorry, I should use character names. Norma
Yeah.
Jennings says to Shelley like you know that this kind of thing can get really bad, basically. And Shelley's
Right.
like, yeah, I know, you know. Like they're just staring and they're looking at history repeating itself, basically. So yeah, you get shades of Leo and Shelley, but you also get shades like hardcore shades of Laura Palmer, I think, in that scene, because Amanda Seyfried is so like angelic looking the same way.
Well, and there
Um,
is that incredibly striking visual of her, like close up on her face.
Staring up
Yeah.
into the sky as
Yeah.
she's tripping balls. So yeah, this like the drug use and um yeah, it's very Firewalk with me and really disturbing. And I did want to give a shout out to someone we're broadcasting this live. Someone in the chat room, Dylan Schwan, said earlier, anytime you see Caleb Landry Jones, you know you're in for a bad time. And that's true. Like Caleb Landry Jones, who is really good in Get Out and also that other movie that's so great that I'm going to look up while I stall for time. But and also he's an X-Men, of course. But and Friday Night Lights. But yeah, he's a creepy kid, so perfectly cast to play this little creep that's like corrupting this angelic small town girl, and then her sort of showing that she's not that angelic after all, and all of that. War on Everyone. War on Everyone is a great 2016 film that like got severely underlooked, but Caleb Landry Jones is fantastically creepy in that movie. So anytime that kid shows up, I'm like, yeah, it gives me the creep and heebie-jeebies. And
Don't forget, he was also boy on bike in No Country for Old Men, as
how
well
could
as
I?
fraternity guy in The Social Network, Joanna.
How could I ever forget?
But no, I agree with you. I think he's a very his face is just very unsettling when he wants it to be. I'm not saying he's like an ugly looking guy. I'm just saying he has the ability to really disturb me with his performance, and
No,
part of that is his looks.
he has not like he's a handsome guy, but he also I agree he has like an unsettling face. It's like an Eddie Redmayne face. That's maybe ginger racist of me, but like but also Eamon Farron, who I think is the name of the actor who closes out this episode, which we'll get to in a bit. He also has a very handsome slash unsettling face. So I
Right?
think David Lynch has really done a good job of like finding these handsome young men who, even more so than the original series, just have like really kind of just slightly off looking faces as well. So
Right.
yeah.
And you mentioned here the Paris Sisters. I Love How You Love Me is what's the song playing in the car for those who are curious. There's a scene where Andy and Hawk are studying case files. Andy says, "Hawk, have you found any Indians anywhere?" I think Hawk doesn't say anything, like says no, right? What are they looking for at this point, Joanna? Remind me.
Hawk has been instructed by the log lady that he has to like find something. Something is lost. He has to find it. It has something to do with his heritage. And Andy, or in an earlier scene, they were like, Hawk, you're an Indian. That's your heritage. And Hawk sort of like rolled his eyes at them. So I think that that's what this scene was. Is like, have you found anything related to being an Indian yet? And Hawk's like, I don't really like that sort of line of
Right. So
thought.
skipping to episode 6.
Yes.
Hawk goes to the restroom. Like loses a coin, notices the resemblance of the coin to an insignia on the bathroom door, right? And the sign on the bathroom door is like quote unquote related to his heritage. He breaks open the door and finds pages from Laura Palmer's diary in the door.
Yeah. Have you found any Indians yet? Excuse me. Yeah. Yeah. Pages from Laura Palmer's diary, which I think is most obvious if you've watched Fire Walk with Me, right? That
Yeah.
those are Laura Palmer diary notes. So that's exciting. A potential break in the case.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
That scene has my favorite line so far of the Twin Peaks revival, which is Hawk saying, "Chad, use the ladies' room," which is like kind of, I want to be a blanket dismissal for anyone who's ever annoying me. Just be like, "Chad, use the ladies' room." Like, go the fuck away, please. You're so annoying. So yeah.
We have a scene with Dr. Jacoby, who is kind of broadcasting live on video, talking about how the country is going to shit. Like I didn't really understand the thrust of what he was saying. It felt like kind of an Alex Jones type speech.
Oh,
I didn't, but that's just maybe how it felt in terms of feel. I don't know. The politics obviously were more grounded, in my
like
opinion.
I would say like a very left wing Alex Jones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Just in terms of like how the bombastic energy of it, I think is what I
Yeah.
would describe it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as
Question.
diplomatic as possible.
Question. Would you subscribe to Dr. Jacoby's YouTube channel? I would.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I already have enough bombasticness from the news myself, but sure, sure. And then we find out that he's selling those shovels, right?
Right. Get your gold shovel to like, get rid of the muck. We're sinking down deep in the mud and the fucks are at it again. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just, I don't know. I thought it was great. I was clapping my hands together with glee during that whole exchange. I hear you that like maybe it's a little too close to home of some of the bombast that we hear in our political rhetoric these days, but like it just delighted me that that's what Dr. Jacoby's up to in the woods. Also, we had someone tweeted at me, and I assume it's a listener of the show, and I'm so sorry I can't remember who it was, but they were asking if the device that Dr. Jacoby built to sort of mass spray his shovels gold was similar to, or maybe designed by Nadine Hurley, who was trying to design that like soundless blind
Yeah.
thing contraption with cotton balls and oil in the first season of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, because it cuts away to Nadine
Listen,
looking fondly
watching it, yeah.
at
Yeah.
Dr. Jacoby's broadcast. So
Yeah, and we have no evidence of that, but that would be kind of fun. That
Yeah.
like Nadine's inventive spirit lives on. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then a couple other things happened this episode. Cooper's doppelganger, Evil Cooper,
yeah,
makes a phone call in prison that causes the security system to go haywire. And I thought it was like I thought he called that device in Buenos Aires.
it seemed like it because the device
It like
seems
vanished,
related.
right?
It like crumples up and vanishes. Yeah, it
yeah.
seems related, but it also seems like it feels like whatever he did, whatever code he did, is related to the plans that he downloaded before he went into the prison. Like he knows of a hack, basically,
Right.
because he got the plans beforehand. So that felt related to me, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't really know what the heck is going on with that whole situation with the device and everything, but I mean, for me, it's difficult for me to understand whether or not to accept that there's like some kind of scientific or technological reason for the prison going haywire. In a show that seems like it's living squarely in the space of the supernatural, like I don't. It's hard for me to ascribe like actual, you know.
But he was like punching in a code. Like he was. It wasn't just. I felt like that scene. It wasn't just him like dialing a phone number. It was dialing more numbers than a phone number. I thought, and I don't know. I'll rewatch it. But I felt like it wasn't just. I feel like there has to be a reason that he downloaded the plans, the super secret
Right.
plans that
Yeah,
he
yeah.
so quickly
You're right.
get.
You're right. That makes
And
sense.
I feel like he went into that prison knowing he could get out of that prison anytime he wanted to, and so this feels like a deployment of that. But I think the ultimate goal for him, I think, is to get to Matthew Lillard, right? Like because Matthew Lillard's in the same prison.
Yes.
So I think that was his ultimate plan. So the system going haywire is all part of that, I guess.
So, what do you make of the device kind of crumpling up? Like, what is your
Buddy,
interpretation of it?
buddy, that I could not tell you.
Okay.
That I am ready to wait and see what's happening.
I'm sure there's a scientific explanation for that. So there's also a scene of Agent Tammy looking at fingerprints, I assume, of Evil Cooper, and then realizing it's the same person as Agent Cooper, right?
Well, she was introduced to him as Agent Cooper, so I think she's looking at an old photo of Agent Cooper and trying to figure out if this could possibly be the same person. But she sees something. Like it feels like Tammy makes a break, but we don't know what it is yet.
Right, like she makes some connection based on the files that she has on the computer or something.
Right. And what's really great is there's a Twin Peaks account that I would suggest you follow called @That'sOurWaldo. And it's just like the ultimate Twin Peaks obsessed Twitter, like seems officially sanctioned, not spoiling anything, but just sort of giving some deep dives. And Tammy's looking at this photo of Agent Cooper, and that Twitter account like found which episode it's from. Like he's in the it's really weird that she has that photo because it's him in the Red Room. So like, why would Tammy have a photo of Agent Cooper in the Red Room? But it's a photo of him from like a certain episode. I think a dream actually, and so that's a little weird, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was weird as well, but I guess my mind immediately went to the idea that maybe he just stood in front of like a wall that looked vaguely red at one point in the series. But you're right; that doesn't. Now that I say it out loud, it doesn't really make much sense. So, yeah, how did that Red Room photo come to be? Maybe we'll find out in future episodes. And finally, there is a scene with young Richard Horn, played by the guy you mentioned earlier, Eamon something, right?
Eamon, I think it's Eamon Farron. Actually,
Farron.
sorry, can I take it back really quickly? I just looked at the photo again. He's definitely in front of like some wood paneling, but the tweet it's wood paneling that looks kind of like it could be red curtains. It's not.
Okay. So I was kind of right then on that.
You're right. You're fine. But the tweet says nice screenshot of episode 4, Tammy, and basically like he took whatever screenshot it was that the photo is that she has in her hand. Anyway, moving along to the Roadhouse.
Yes. So young Richard Horn is smoking next to a no smoking sign. They try to stop him, but he kind of bribes the guy. Like, it's not clear to me if he's just bribing him for the smoking, because that seems like a lot of money for a bribe. Did you have an opinion on that?
Oh, of course. Yeah, he's bribing him for, I mean, what we find out in episode 6 probably is drug running, but
right.
It's definitely a heftier bribe than like, please let me smoke here.
Yeah. And then Jane Levy, the actress, is one of the girls at the next table. He kind of grabs her in a very basically sexually assaults her, right?
He grabs her friend, yeah. So Jane Levy is playing Elizabeth, and then I can't remember the name of the other girl who's at the table, but he grabs the other girl, and Jane Levy is the one who's sort of like looking at him and being like, let her go. But yeah, it's a crazy degree of assault that is just kind of endured in that scene. Yeah. And sorry, Dylan Schwan, once again, who like probably should be an official third member of the podcast, says apparently the fingerprints are reversed. So that's what Tammy's looking at. Apparently, evil Coop has mirror image fingerprints of regular Coop. So
I see. I did not catch that on the computer screen, but that does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, are we just to take this as a character building moment for young Richard Horn?
Well, it's a weird introduction of young Richard Horton, is it not? This is such a weird character introduction because the only reason you find out that it's Richard Horn is because of the closing credits, which is how you find out the name of like so many of the characters. So that's how you find out that Amanda Seyfried's character Becky is not just dating Caleb Landry Jones' character, but married to him because she has his last name. So presumably, probably this is Audrey Horne's son. We don't know, but probably timing wise. And my favorite crackpot theory about that is that if you remember back in the original Twin Peaks, obviously Audrey Horne was had a huge crush on Agent Dale Cooper. Is it possible that Agent Dale Cooper, evil Cooper, when he came out of the lodge, had sex with Audrey and then abandoned her, and that this is the child of Audrey Horne and evil Cooper? I'm not saying it's not possible.
You're not saying it's not possible.
And the way that he grabs that girl in the booth is very similar to the way that Cooper grabbed that woman that he killed a few episodes ago in the hotel room.
Right, evil
bed.
Cooper, right? Yeah,
evil Cooper. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, this kid sucks. I wouldn't be surprised if he were the offspring of an evil doppelganger, if they can even impregnate people. But either way, this is a very bad seed in the Horn. The Horn brothers, Audrey's dad and her uncle were always not good people, but they weren't as violently evil as this kid seems to be.
Yeah, they're more of a classy evil,
Yeah, benignly evil.
Yeah. Running this brothel with this and cheating people in these business deals, and not evil that victimless crimes. You know what I'm saying? Victimless crimes. I mean, except for all the women, but you know what I mean. Uh, so this guy seems more on the explicit evil side. Let's talk more about young Richard Horn. But first, we got to thank all the people that contributed to the Kickstarter for Peaks TV. I have a few people to thank: Kirsten Mitchell, Michael C. from Frodsham, United Kingdom, Sophie Elizabeth Johnson, Corey and Tyrone, Brad Page, Kimber Myers, Alan Cloak, Jeff Wilson, Leon Weber, Mark Haycock from Worcester in the United Kingdom, Jonathan Carpenter, Rob Silverberg, and Ben Gruner. Thanks so much for your contributions to our Kickstarter this year. Joanna, you have some people to thank as well?
Yeah, I want to thank someone called Anonymous. Deputy Andy Chang, Grant Piercy, Derek Ambrose, Aton Greenbaum, Liza Hicks, Jim Meisterich. There is a pronunciation and I still messed it up. Joe Ruggiero, Wendy Austin, Brian Seitz, Nick Pick, Ben Hubbard, Carrie, Damon and Erica Austin, and Logan Toski. Thank you guys so much.
Really appreciate it. And yeah, the only reason this podcast exists is because of all those people we just named, as well as a bunch of others who contributed to our Kickstarter so that we could recap the show, a.k.a. so Joanna could explain to me what the heck is going on in Twin Peaks: The Return.
I think we're all learning together from Dylan tonight. So
yes, yep. I agree completely. All right, so what happens to young Richard Horn? They're in a garage. He's in a garage somewhere with this guy named Red, played by Balthazar Getty, and they talk about drug deals and talks about some drug running, and Red just saying a bunch of weird ass stuff in this scene, talking about seeing the king and I, and threatens Richard Horn not to screw him over. Then he does a supernatural coin trick. He like throws a coin up in the air and like picks it out of Richard Horn's body, and then still retrieves it from the air. And like for some reason, the fact that he was able to trick Richard Horn it seems to me like Richard Horn gets super pissed about that. Is that your interpretation? Yeah. Mm-hmm. He gets so pissed that he drives into town and accidentally kills a kid, right? At this intersection. Yeah. Which I think is the same intersection where like there's a big confrontation with Laura Palmer and her dad and
Mike.
Yeah, in
Firewalk
with Me, right?
Yes, correct.
It's a very visually striking, recognizable intersection. Also,
I think there's even like the same or a similar lumber truck or whatever. The lumber truck is what like sort of tipped me off. I was like, oh, are we back where we started?
So then Richard Horn goes somewhere, tries to clean off the car. I think that's the last we see him in this episode. Right?
That kid sucks. Is this episode 6, the most violent and gruesome and upsetting episode of Twin Peaks ever?
It's pretty violent. It's pretty.
I mean, Firewalk with Me is pretty bad, but like episode wise,
I actually thought episode 6 was the easiest to follow. Like it felt like the most closest to conventional TV that an episode was so far this season. Does that make sense? Like it's just like, oh, I understand. Like A leads to B. Character here's like the A story. Here's the B story. That kind of thing.
Yeah, but that's not my objection. I'm not sure that I'm even objecting. I just I have a friend of mine who's a new-ish mom, and I remember we were watching the original Mad Max, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I can't watch this movie anymore because a kid gets run over by a car, and it's really upsetting." And even in that film, you don't see anything; you just see like a shoe on the road or whatever. And I was just thinking of not to be too soft-hearted or even gendered about it, but like I was thinking about all the moms watching this episode of Twin Peaks, and like it's not just like you see a kid and then he runs him over and they cut and what happens. It's like you see that kid brutalized for a very long time. And then there's like an assassination later in the episode that is also completely insanely violent. And so like it's not confused.
What do you mean brutalized? Like you mean you see him on the ground for a long time? Is that what you mean? Or
like his head is his mom is holding him and his head is like open.
Yeah.
Like, like you can, like his skull is fractured and you can see like, not that you can like see brain, you see gore, and it's like, you see that. And like, that's the whole point of the scene. Like we've been sort of skipping around a little bit, but like, I think the whole point of that scene is like, everyone's horrified, but no one will actually help this woman except for Harry Dean Stanton's character, Carl. But like, everyone is just standing around and just like, it's too much. and they don't know how to engage with it. Her grief and this mother's grief and horror over her dead son. And so they're all just like standing agog and aghast. And Carl's literally the only person who gives her any kind of comfort. And I thought that was like a really stunning piece of commentary, actually. Like it just reminded me of like, I mean, today as we're recording, last night there was a crazy fire in London that burned up like a huge building, right? And a lot of people died. This morning, a gunman opened fire on a bunch of like GOP baseball team in Virginia, and then a number of UPS employees were murdered in a gunfire spree in San Francisco. That all happened today, and it's like. It's so hard for us to engage with the magnitude of that. And so we just sort of like retreat from it. It's like, how do you even handle all of that happening within like the span of 24 hours? And you can kind of engage with it on social media and be like, oh my God, how horrible from afar. But how much are we actually like really, truly engaging in the horror that we see day in and day out, and can we even like engage with everything and still like go on living? Do you know what I mean? Not to get too crazy deep on this Twin Peaks podcast, but like I think that's what David Lynch wanted us to think about in that scene. So
Right. Well, I had some trivial remarks to say about it, but
no,
no. I think you really put it well. Like that is a very great interpretation of that whole thing. Okay, so we're getting to the Dougie stuff last because I think there's a lot to dive into there.
Yeah.
But what else happens in this scene? Duncan Todd, played by Patrick Fischler, we see him at work in Vegas. A red box appears on his screen, and he understands that as like a code or a signal. He opens a safe. He pulls something out without getting his prints on it. It's like a white envelope with a black dot. It seems to be an assassination order, which we get the sense of because later on we see the assassin Ike the Spike Stadler, played by Christoph Zajac Dinek. He gets this envelope that looks like the same one that Duncan Todd pulled out, and it has two photos of it. One is of this woman named Lorraine, and the other one is of Dougie. And then we see him viciously kill Lorraine later on, as well
and
as like
her coworkers.
and her coworkers as well, right? To get to Lorraine with an ice pick.
And he's like really sad that his ice pick got bent, and like he is so. It's just so much. Like maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know if I was like still traumatized with that kid getting run over, but it just felt like an excessive amount of stabbing. I don't know what the right amount of stabbing is, but that felt like an excessive amount of stabbing. So,
well, it was not done in a way that one would describe as tasteful. You see him like twisting the pick around in her body and stuff. So there is some sense of reveling. I don't know if wallowing is the right word, but he is.
Oh yeah, he gets off on the violence.
At the very least, accentuating the brutality of this scene, right? And
yeah.
Oh, by the way, one random note I wanted to call. I know we're jumping around here. Sorry about that. But did you get a Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet vibe from Balthazar Getty's Red character?
Either him or Eamon Farrah's character. I guess Balthazar Getty's character.
Yeah, just the way he's talking, like the cadence of his voice.
Yeah,
it felt very Anthony Hopkins-esque. So anyway, just wanted to call that out.
Dennis Hopper-esque?
I'm sorry. Dennis Hopper-esque. Not Anthony Hopkins.
And we should note that Red did appear earlier in this series briefly in the Roadhouse, making like eyes or potentially even finger guns at Shelley. So he has some connection to Shelley, or it seemed like they had some connection. So.
Right. So anyway, so going back to this thing of like the brutality, it seems like. Exploring brutality in these kind of conventional, often suburban situations seems like something that drives part of Lynch's work, at least, right? And that's something we saw certainly in Fire Walk with Me, right? But also here,
it's a very like antiseptic looking office building. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Lorraine, when we saw her like in close up with that, like in episode 5 with that bruise on her face, like she looked kind of like weird and seedy, but in the context, the larger context of her office, she looks just like so normal. And so for this guy to come in and just, brutalize everyone, that's just, yeah, yeah.
And I believe he is a little person, right? Like, so this kind of goes to our conversation earlier about like when I see a scene like this, I think to myself, what is the objective of making him a little person? Like as a director, is David Lynch trying to say something that this person who is not a typical, like his appearance is not typical? Is there something he's saying by trying to have that person murder all these people with an ice pick? And the cynical side of me says that it is a bizarre and unsettling visual, and that's why David Lynch chose it. But I do wonder, like, is there something more that Lynch is trying to say? Is he trying to expand our idea of what an assassin can be? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's where my mind goes when I see something like this.
Yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, all right. What else happens in this scene? I think that's basically it in terms of non-Dougie stuff, right? Oh,
yeah.
wait, no. There is one other major thing that happens.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A little something happens. Yeah.
So we see Gordon getting off the phone with Albert, and he steps into the rain and into Max Vaughn's bar, and
fuck Gene Kelly, you motherfucker, is a great line that
yes.
we need to repeat. Yeah.
And he says Diane, and then we see Diane from the back. She turns around. It's Laura Dern in an epic wig, you say. And I know you're a good wig judge, Joanna. So do you actually think this is a good wig?
Oh, it's a great wig. Yeah.
Great wig. She says hello, Albert. We find out who Diane is. It took my breath away, Joanna.
Did it?
It did.
That's so charming.
It did, because it's just like you've seen Cooper talk to Diane for dozens of episodes, and you kind of just want to know what the deal is. And so this is the woman that like can theoretically reach him, right? She has a special relationship. She has a special relationship with Cooper, and so maybe they're thinking, hey, bring Diane to evil Cooper, like she can get something out of him, or get him to communicate in a way that he's not right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be my assumption. I want to own when I'm wrong, and I guessed wrong. I thought it was Laura Palmer's mom that we'd be going after, but it is not. A lot of people said Diane. I was like, I don't think so, but they were right. And a lot of it didn't take my breath away because a lot of people, as soon as Laura Dern was cast, were like, oh my God, she's playing Diane. And I don't know, I think there might have been a few leaks. Like, I thought this set was like sort of airtight, but the fact that so many people were so sure that Michael Cera was playing Andy's kid and so sure that Laura Dern was playing Diane, like those two casting, just like everyone seemed so sure, and they were right. So,
yeah,
I don't know. But
on May 9th, so over a month ago, H. Perry Horton tweeted out, the cover of this week's Variety magazine, the Twin Peaks promo material, is really pushing Laura Dern's involvement. If she's not Diane, I'll eat a log. That's what H. Perry Horton said a month ago. So, H. Perry Horton, you don't need to eat a log. You were right about who Diane is. So I think a lot of people...
Yeah, a lot of people thought that, but I didn't take my breath away because I knew Laura Dern was coming, like blah, blah, but I was like delighted by it. She looks great. It's a great moment. Like it's brief, like it leaves you wanting more. I was very pleased with how it was deployed. It was great.
Yeah, it is definitely a memorable moment. I mean, this is my favorite episode of the whole season so far. Like I said, because of how accessible it is. And because, it features Dougie heavily, right? Anyway, let's go all the way back to what happened with Dougie. So in episode 5, there's a bunch of goons checking on Dougie's car. It's still there. And they kind of drive past the house threateningly. And then, let's see. Like, there's a... Go ahead, Joanna. What's up?
I'm so sorry I was coughing. I really apologize.
No worries. Are they the guys that placed something on Dougie's car, by the way?
there's like so many cars watching his car,
Yeah.
but
But
at some point,
at some point, something's placed on Dougie's car, and then these like carjackers come by to steal the car, and then the car blows up, and the kid from across the street sees it.
right?
In what is probably the worst special effect this season, which is saying something.
Yeah.
It's pretty rough because I mean I will say this about it: that scene shows how you do a car explosion on a limited budget, right? Because you basically they get into the car, you hear the explosion, you see a bright flash on the kid's face, and then it cuts back to car on fire already. So that is how you do a car explosion without actually blowing up a car on a suburban street.
That's hilarious.
So I thought pretty rough. But I mean, no other time in the show did I feel like a special effect was that rough unintentionally. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's been other special effects that are like kind of rough, like Dougie's head turning into a pearl or whatever. But I could always read that as potentially David Lynch trying to do something with how rough it looked. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But in this case, I was just like that. I don't think anyone could intend for it to look that rough. So anyway, you know, take it for how you will. Maybe you thought it looked awesome. I'm not making a big deal out of it. So there's this pretty funny sequence of events where Dougie goes in and, you know, Phil has like all these coffees and he takes a coffee. And again, like that seems to be one thing from his Agent Cooper past that he is holding on to, this affinity for coffee. We see Tony, played by Tom Sizemore, telling Dougie, "I covered for your ass. You owe me big time for that." And Dougie returns the favor by totally calling Tony out in front of all of his coworkers.
Yeah.
Which kind of sucked.
And that's because inside Dougie is Agent Dale Cooper, who is the best detective since Sherlock Holmes. And he's lying. And you can tell he's lying because he's such a good detective.
Yeah.
This is like, you I think are the ones who brought it up, that we should really pay attention to when Dougie is not just repeating back something that someone's said to him. Most of the time he's repeating back some form of something people have said to him, but he's lying is not one of those. So, you know.
Yeah, and I know I reference my colleague Stephen Tobolowsky quite often on our podcast together, Jenna, but he does tell this story of when he broke his neck and he got a concussion and how he was lying on the gurney and he kept asking the question, where are we? And he kept repeating it over and over again because he's so out of it. But then like one time when he said like, where are we? What happened? Like the fact that he said a new sentence, everyone, like his wife, really, it caught her attention. She's like, oh my gosh, something has changed. Like the loop has broken. That's how I feel whenever I see Dougie say something that's not repeating what someone else said. Right? It's like he's breaking the loop and it's notable. And so he says he's lying at the meeting, and it's not something that he's repeating from someone else, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
But in the vein of repeating, like I'm gonna step on your toes a little bit here and say like how much I loved this next scene when the boss is giving Dougie all these instructions and Dougie just like repeats back these words that are Agent Dale Cooper words, like agent and game and case files. And I don't know if have you looked at the descriptions of each episode over on Showtime?
The descriptions are like one sentence long, or often like a few words long. Right?
Just a couple words. They're always a quote from the episode.
Yeah.
And this week's episode was case files. And so like you're sitting there and you're like, oh, like Dougie being an insurance adjuster is so fun because it does have all these similar vocab words as being an agent of the FBI. And so you can have Dale Cooper say agent, game, case files, and like, you know what I mean? So it's and you know he gets to play detective in the next episode as well. So.
Right. So Dougie has to pee and doesn't know how. This woman sneaks him into the restroom, makes reference to the fact that maybe he's tried to hit on her before and she's open to it, right?
Yeah.
If I'm mistaken.
She's open to it now that he has a better haircut and is like lost the pillow from under his shirt. Yeah.
Yeah. And later in the episode, Dougie like exits the elevator. Everyone's angry because he doesn't get out of the way. And then he kind of stands at this gunslinger statue and is holding the case files and kind of looking at it. And this is one of the few times where there is a scene that's not music, where the credits play in episode 5. You know what I'm saying? Like the credits come up and it's just Dougie. And I thought that was like a lovely ending for that episode. So then in episode 6, he's still standing there. Apparently he was there all night. And a guard helps him and gets him home. And Janie E like tells him to put his son to bed, and he gets really fascinated by the clapper. And
the simple pleasures of Dougie Jones, like it's just, I don't know, it's really charming. I mean, charming and upsetting at the same time, which is what David Lynch is, right? Charming and upsetting at the same time.
Yes. And also outside their door was this envelope which features photos of Dougie and Jade, and so they know that they're being watched. And they get a phone call, and Janie E basically just says, "Look, I'm gonna handle this myself," because she wants to take control of the situation that Dougie has so royally messed up, right?
Yeah, she says she's going to meet them at the corner of Guinevere and Merlin, and I feel like earlier when they were in the casino and he was trying to figure out where he lives on like Marola Drive or something like that. It's not Arthurian, but there was something Arthurian about like his address earlier. So I don't know. There's some weird like.
Well, I mean, I think you're ignoring the obvious reference here, Joanna, which is that David Lynch was a huge fan of Guy Ritchie's King Arthur: Legend of the Sword that came out this summer.
Who wouldn't be?
And that's why he put that reference in there. So
we also need to point out that like Dougie was thrilled to see Jade's photo. And he says, Jade gives you rides, which is just like, which is a Dougie original. And it's just, you know, Janie E takes it the wrong way, and it's just pretty good.
I don't think she took it the wrong way, actually. But
what do you mean?
Well, I mean, because she did give Dougie a ride in both senses of the term.
But that's not what Coop means when he says
no, I understand that. That. But I'm just saying, like, inadvertently, Dougie has conveyed the truth of the matter.
Yes,
to her.
that's true.
That's what's so amazing about Dougie's character is that
out of the mouth of
he's dropping truth bombs left and right. So
true.
And then, like, as Dougie's sitting at the table, Mike finds a way to communicate with Dougie via the Red Room. He says, "You have to wake up. Don't die. Don't die." It seems like he's talking to Agent Cooper, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to tell Agent Cooper, "Don't die. You're trapped
and wake up." Yeah,
wake up. You're trapped in Dougie's body. Your head's all jacked up. Like, wake up." Dougie goes to work on the case files, and there appears to be lights guiding him to possible anomalies, but then he just marks the paper with random ladders and stairs like he's drawing on them like a child. But as we know with everything that happens with Dougie in the show so far, all these supernatural lights seem to be guiding him towards truths that other people really desire, and that's also the case in this situation as well. So later on, Dougie goes into the office and he delivers the files to his boss, and his boss at first sees his scribblings as the rantings of a child and a mad person, but then realizes, oh my gosh, you're trying to tell me something about Tony, aka Tom Sizemore's character, like realizes that something is horribly wrong, right? And thanks Dougie for finding it.
Right. Doesn't say what it is, but yes. Like, yeah.
And then Janie E meets these henchmen at this park, and we see Jeremy Davies shows up.
We get a little Dave Chen and Joanna Robinson history, right?
Yeah, Jeremy Davies, a great character. He played a great character in Justified, the FX original series.
Dickie Bennett. Like, what's great is if you look at Dickie Bennett, if you refresh your memory and go look at a photo of Dickie Bennett, Jeremy Davies is wearing the Dickie Bennett hair and the Dickie Bennett facial hair. So I feel like David Lynch is like, you know what? We're just going to do your Dickie look. That's what we're going to do. Yeah. Jeremy Davies also very famously on Lost, of course. And he is playing Jesus Christ himself this season on American Gods. So go check it out.
So Janie E gives this very impassioned speech about how, look, I can't believe you're trying to take money from us, and how the interest they charge, which is, in my opinion, very normal for mob rates, she takes issue with and decides to only give them like 20% interest or something like that. Gives them like $26,000, I think was the final amount, or something around there, $25,000.
I thought it was 25, yeah.
So it gives them a few $1,000s extra interest instead of the $30,000 that they asked for. And Jeremy Davies calls her a tough dame. Do you think this is going to solve the problem, Joanna? I don't know. I don't know if these mob people are going to take $25,000 for an answer.
I mean, who knows? There's like how many people are after Dougie slash Cooper at this point, right? Because there's like the people. If you want to believe me, that there are people who want to kill him, people want to get this money from him, and then the casino people who also want a piece of him. So that's a lot of people. I don't know. All I can hope is that this is not the last we've seen of Jeremy Davies. So, you know.
So I want to ask like a couple of general questions about that. I mean, I think that's basically all the plot points. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, we missed Ernie Hudson. Sort of like the fact that Major Garland Briggs Prince, like caused an flag to go up at the Pentagon, basically,
Yeah.
and Colonel Davis, played by Ernie Hudson, tells his agent, whose name I think is Cindy, but I couldn't find her on the cast list, to go figure out what's going on. So she's going to South Dakota. So that's another like government player in the game. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that we didn't talk about the fact that Carl sees that kid's like soul.
Yeah, when that kid gets hit by a car, like his soul goes into the sky, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good call outs. Good call outs. So as we get to the end of this episode, the question is, it is exceptionally difficult to evaluate the show before the show's over. I mean, I just think it's so sprawling. There's no sense of the pace of a normal serialized television show, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, episode 6 is the closest, in my opinion, it's ever come. But in general, Lynch does not seem to be concerned with, feeding us information at a rate that necessarily keeps us engaged on a week-to-week basis. It feels very much like this show needs to be evaluated as a whole when it's over. So given that, as I've said multiple times during the course of this episode, it is very difficult to evaluate this show. Is there anything we can say about the Dougie storyline, which is very funny, very enjoyable, probably my favorite aspect of the show so far, right? Is there something we think Lynch is trying to say about the modern workplace? It strikes me as very similar to Mary Harron's American Psycho movie, right? Which, spoiler for that movie, if you haven't seen American Psycho starring Christian Bale, like at the end of the movie, Christian Bale's character, what's his name in that movie?
Patrick Bateman.
Patrick Bateman. He tries to confess to his crimes, but no one believes him. He tries to say like he murdered all these people, but no one believes him for a variety of reasons. One of them being that when he claims like so and so is dead, people say, well, I just had lunch with so and so the other day. Like these people, they can't distinguish. These businessmen are unable to distinguish each other from each other, and it seemed like that movie was trying to say something about how interchangeable these investment bankers are and these worker drones are in this kind of workplace, and how like these guys are all just pure id that's indistinguishable from each other, that are concerned with the most shallow things. There's many lessons you can extrapolate from that ending, but if there's any sort of moral from this Dougie storyline, that feels like one of the morals is the idea that that in this modern world, both in terms of family and work, we are so disconnected from each other. Like there's so little understanding of who we really are that someone can lose their mind and no one would even notice. So, I mean, I think that's like one potential interpretation. How does that strike you, John? When you hear that, do you think to yourself, yeah, I could see that? Or do you think to yourself, that's nonsense?
Well, you can't see me nodding. I really do. I think that's a great interpretation. And I think it sort of goes with my like rant that I had earlier about the, car accident scene. This sense of disconnection and alienation. That
sometimes we just crash into each other just to feel something. You know what I mean?
Shut up! How dare you? No, yeah, you're hilarious. That. The like inability to really engage with other people and that alienation. I don't know that it was Twin Peaks. The original Twin Peaks is really a lot of it had to do with our inability to really know someone, right? The unknowableness of people.
Right, you think you know someone like Laura Palmer, but you don't really, right?
And so this sort of takes it a little bit further and has even more to do with like how we don't really want to know people or don't really care to know people. That's not really what we're here for. And we're so self-centered and so in our own thing. And the fact that Naomi Watts, like, I go back and forth as to whether or not Naomi Watts' Janie has like a thankless role or a great role. Because it's like veering in Doris territory occasionally, right? The way that she's like haranguing Dougie, who like we know to be kind of an innocent, but at the same time, I don't know, this interesting depiction of someone who um has her priorities, which is like safety, like care for her son and safety for the family and all this sort of stuff like that, and like is not really looking at her partner anymore, which happens all the time in marriage as far as I understand it. And I think it's a really fascinating commentary, and I think it really does tap into a lot of what we're all experiencing right now, with like the faux connection of social media and the actual distance that it causes. And also just like Dougie's bewilderment. Like I think that's also a really good depiction of how a lot of us feel wandering around in 2017, like just generally bewildered and standing the wrong way in the elevator and unsure how to drink our coffee, but knowing that we want coffee. I don't know.
I don't know that Lynch intended, the political reading, but certainly, I can't.
I just said 2017. I didn't say politics, but like,
okay, fair enough.
But I don't even mean like, in this Trumptopia or whatever. I just mean like, it doesn't even have to be that politicized. Just there's something going on in 2017. It's beyond our own left and right wing politics that I think a lot of people are feeling just adrift. So, and Lynch, because Lynch put this together well before the election. So it's not, I don't think it's a commentary on the election. I think it is just a commentary on, people feeling adrift. So
I think the only thing all that could totally be valid. I think it's just like we have to wait and see. Maybe a lot of this will be undercut in future episodes. Like, I don't know. But I think so far we're 6 episodes in. We're about a third of the way through this new season, and that feels like a valid interpretation of like what the Dougie character is supposed to be. And also the idea that, like you said, this is about Agent Cooper returning to his mind, within the Dougie's body potentially. Like, that is. I love that is not what anyone could have possibly expected. I mean, I think a lot of people probably expected Agent Cooper to show up and go on adventures in this season, right? Like, and
I think nobody expected that Kyle MacLachlan would spend most of his time in this series, like wandering around in a daze.
Yeah, like a catatonic state, repeating people's phrases back to them, right?
Yeah, though we should, like, I don't know if we wanted. It's probably a fool's errand to take bets of like when Dougie will go full Dale Cooper.
Let's do it. Yeah, go ahead.
Because by episode 6, he's wearing a Dale Cooper suit. Like, he's found a suit that actually fits him, and it's a black one. Like, it's a Dale Cooper suit.
Put it down, John Robinson. What episode do you think he will become Dale Cooper?
12. Out of an 18 episode series, right?
That was going to be me. Okay, I'll say 10.
Oh,
so,
all right.
Yeah, so we're 6 episodes in. I'll say episode 10. You say episode 12. It could be episode 8.
It could. It really could.
All right, Joanna.
But
overall,
I think that Lynch is really going to test our patience with it, like he did in that ladder stair scene. Were you not like just because there's also that like slight edge of your teeth noise of the pencil scraping on the paper that I was just like, I will watch all of this, but begrudgingly. I don't want to watch this.
What scene are you referring to?
Oh, sorry. When Dougie is going through the case files and sort of like making.
Oh, yeah. That does take a long time.
It takes a long time. And then it takes a long time for his boss to go back through the files himself. So like, yeah, it's I think that Lynch is not just trying to test our patience in like a trollish way, but also like I think he finds value in making you sit with something for a while.
Yeah. That's always been his MO.
Yeah.
From my perspective. So there's nothing about those scenes that surprised me in any way. So, we also should mention that, by the way, police found Dougie's car license plate on the roof of the car, the house
Yeah,
next door. That was another thing forgot to mention.
Dougie Love. Oh, and then the 119 lady is still there.
Yes. The 119 lady.
Still saying 119. So.
The which lady are you referring to? Let's just.
Oh, the kid in
Yeah.
who you mentioned, his mom, who's credited as drugged up mom in the
Yeah.
credits, and occasionally she just shouts 119, or 19, yeah, 119, which sounds to me like 911 backwards. But what do I know?
And Agent Cooper's fingerprints are backwards with Evil Cooper, so maybe she's from the other side. And anyway,
Yeah, I think the idea that she might be from the Black Lodge is not a bad one.
Yeah.
So,
so 2 questions before we end for today.
yeah,
One is like overall, how did you like these episodes? How are you still enjoying the show?
I love it. I'm loving watching it. I love watching it every Sunday with everyone else. I love that. I love like that. That's the first world TV writer problems, but like I love not having screeners. It's the same with Game of Thrones. I love that just like everyone tunes in at the same time. Nobody knows in advance what's going to happen. We're all experiencing it together. It's really fun. And even in a very brutal episode like this one, there's enough Dougie lightness to just make every single Sunday night watching the show a pleasant experience. So I'm enjoying it.
I think it's interesting. Like I said, I think the Dougie stuff is probably what I'm most interested. Like, it continues to provide new joys every week. You know what I mean? Like, it's the one that feels most similar to just any like other films and TV shows that we've seen, kind of fish out of water situation. And of course, we're all like everyone's rooting for Agent Dale Cooper. So I'm really loving the Dougie stuff. I'm kind of nervous about how sprawling the show is and whether the vast majority of these plot lines are going to get tied up in a satisfying fashion.
Well, I feel like I can see a lot of them sort of careening towards each other, and I think we've become so unused to long seasons. Like the fact that there's still 12 more episodes of this show is kind of surprising. At least the way like the shows that you and I tend to cover in this fashion tend to be like 10 episodes or 12 episode seasons. This is like nearly a 22 episode season. So like I think there is actually room for everything to at least come together in a coherent way.
Right.
Whether or not it's all like tied up satisfactorily or David Lynch wants to leave us intentionally dangling.
Yeah, that's
but
the
if
thing,
but
is
if
like,
if he leaves us dangling, I don't think it won't be because he couldn't figure out how to bring everything together. It'll
right,
be because he wants to leave us on the edge of that cliff.
Have you ever got to the end of a David Lynch film or TV show or whatever and thought to yourself, well, that really tied everything up really nice and neatly? I just have never felt that way. So
I think Fire Walk with Me does like a.
Oh yeah, I guess that's as close as he's ever come, I think.
Probably, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So, but I think like I do still admire the show, and I do still think like it's like nothing else we've seen on television. It continues to be a fascinating piece of work because it is David Lynch with a fairly significant budget, other than car explosions, being able to play out kind of what he wants and to tell the story seemingly exactly the way he wants it. It does not feel like he's restrained in any way here. So I think it continues to be really interesting, and so I'm enjoying it on certain levels. But Twin Peaks as a whole is not something that is kind of David Chen's kind of show, but still getting a lot out of it so far, and we'll see how much the plot lines continue to sprawl in the weeks to come. Last thing before we wrap up today. And that is this post that Clinton McClung made. Clinton McClung is a programmer at the Seattle International Film Festival. Full disclosure, I was on the jury, one of the juries of the Seattle International Film Festival this year, and I'm a big fan of the festival and all the work that they do. Clinton McClung made this post on Facebook. I have his permission to share it on the podcast, and I wanted to see what you had to say about it, Jonah Robinson. Clinton says here, quote, I haven't been reading Twin Peaks recaps because trying to unravel a David Lynch story before seeing the whole thing is pointless. So he just called her podcast pointless, but let's put that aside for now. This writer expressed some of my thoughts about Lynch's attitude towards women, which have come to the fore while watching the new season. And Clinton links to this Vulture piece called Teach Me How to Dougie. Clinton writes, no doubt that Lynch has created some great roles for women and championed a bunch of incredible actresses. But throughout his career, he has also shown a somewhat limited narrative view of women as harlots or victims. Lynch's works are often a fetishistic callback to another time. Lynch is definitely a fetishist, and that's fine. And a surrealist critique of the dark underbelly of America, which, of course, leads to some dark places for all his characters. But I still can't help but cringe while watching the new Twin Peaks when, say, Madeline Zima shows up with little character motivation other than to take her clothes off, or the wife of Sheriff Truman II comes off as a shrill caricature, or an obvious bad boy openly and brutally molests a young girl in a club full of people. Lynch is Lynch, and I certainly don't want him to change who he is as an artist. I'm just tired of seeing women portrayed this way. I prefer stories that show the strong, independent, smart, diverse women that I know in the real world. Fortunately, those stories are becoming more common and gaining more traction. Has anyone else been thinking about this? End quote. What do you make of that? Like that this idea that Lynch's depiction of women is fairly limited, and that's kind of something that's manifested in the show with characters like. What's her name?
What's her name?
Sheriff Truman's
the other girl.
No,
Doris.
Doris, Janie E, and the Lorraine who got murdered this episode brutally. These women tend to fall into like a couple of recognizable archetypes, none of which are particularly flattering.
Maybe, but then there's also people like Norma and Shelley and like that I would bristle at them being called harlots or victims or shrillish shrews. Like I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that I think David Lynch's women characters, at least in Twin Peaks, I don't like. Mulholland Drive is a whole different thing, are like completely perfect. But I think when you have things like Catherine Coulson's Log Lady, you've got, I think there are more shades on that spectrum than that sort of assessment is allowing for, personally.
So you're kind of like you're kind of having my reaction to the other person's email we read at the beginning. It's like that you don't agree with this comment's description of the show, right?
I just don't think, like, I think I could create like 5 categories that David Lynch's female characters fall into, but like that's 5 categories. Like that's and like and I would really hesitate to define. I mean, Norma's character, played by Peggy Lipton, is not a big part of this revival, but I'd be really hesitant to put her in any category. And then when you've got someone like Lucy, played by Kimmy Roberts, like she's sort of like infantilized a little bit, but she's also like strong in her own right. I don't know. I think when you have the brutality of women as you do, like brutality of women, pretty young female victims is definitely a Lynch thing, and that is probably pretty disturbing. If disturbing might be strong. That might be something he wanted to talk to his therapist about, is what I have to say about that. But I'll be watching. I'll be looking to see, like, I can't imagine that Laura Dern's characterization of Diane is going to be a harlot or shrill or a victim. So, yeah, I guess I just disagree. I do.
All right. All that being said, keep the emails coming into peakstv@gmail.com. Find more episodes of this podcast at peakstv.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a recap of Season 3, Episodes 7 and 8. In the meantime, Joanna Robinson, where can people find more of your work on the internet this week?
You can find me on VanityFair.com, or you can follow me on Twitter @JoeWroteThis. Or if you are interested in catching up on Game of Thrones before the new season, we are doing a complete rewatch over on Storm of Spoilers.
Find all my stuff at Twitter. DaveChen.net, DaveChen.net, and you can also follow me on Twitter at DaveChensky. That's twitter.com/DaveChenSky. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in a couple weeks.